increasing our standard of living is extremely powerful. So I want to go on to talk about somebody else. So Thomas Kuhn, who's a famous, Thomas Kuhn is a famous historian of science, and he's passed on by now. But he talked about the structure of scientific revolutions. And in doing so, I mean, he had a wonderful book on this that I've read pieces of. And in doing so, he basically, my takeaway was industrial revolutions or scientific revolutions are not linear. So if you invest 100 hours today and you invest 100 hours next month, you're not going to necessarily get 200. You're not going to get two equivalent size results out. Okay, you can go down the wrong path. You can find something that's very interesting, but perhaps not immediately useful. There's all sorts of other interesting things like this. And so his perspective that scientific evolution is not linear is very, very important, and that makes R&D all the more challenging. Then I want to toss in the great mathematician Hardy, G.H. Hardy, who was very proud that the work he did was not applied. In fact, he had said something to the effect, he doesn't imagine when there'll be a time where the people see a warlike use for number theory or quantum mechanics. And of course,
oh God.
Yes, and then both of these, now, right now, in terms of computer security, if you look at the computer security challenges as a war, every time you go to the internet, you're using some tools where Hardy was a great expert at in number theory. Yeah. Okay, so in fact, there I would argue that Hardy, presaged a giant warlike behaviors in our internet and hacking. And he also, quantum mechanics, of course, eventually led to the quantum phenomenon and the power of the atom. Some of the power is hidden in the atom, which led to nuclear, on the good side, nuclear things that, heat houses and stuff like that. On the bad side, nuclear weapons. So Hardy, in a way, although he's very proud of doing non-applied things, his work led to some tremendously huge applications, probably in the hundreds of billions of dollars today in valuation. So there's very interesting things along these lines, and I want to even take another turn and talk about another famous guy who was the first president of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, and this was Abraham Flexner. And Flexner was famous for talking about, and had an essay on this, the usefulness of useless knowledge. So
that's great.
Well, it's a great title, but I think
exactly, a great title.
It reminds me, and it's a nice read. He talks about Marconi versus Maxwell, and a whole bunch of very important folks, some very entrepreneurial and some very academic, and yet he almost contrasts the entrepreneurial types with the academic types, saying, look, the academics have this long-standing thing. We're going to be working with electromagnetic radiation for a very long time. We already have, and it has led to everything from the electric motor to our cell signals to this conversation we're having is all driven by this. And so it was a fantastic set of work that Maxwell and all his predecessors had done, and subsequent researchers as well. However, Maxwell didn't build any huge companies or anything like that. On the other hand, many of these other greats, who I think are all great. I mean, I'm not going to choose sides here. Marconi and Edison and all these guys built some gigantic economic force, which added to people's standard of living. But so did Maxwell's work and others folks. So I think that with R&D, there's a big complexity here, and people choose sides sometimes, which I think is a mistake. Now, because a scholar's job is to take complicated things or things we don't understand and understand them and simplify them and explain them. Sometimes that's misconstrued as, oh, that's easy. Well, no, that's among the hardest things that humans do.
Right.
However, in exchange, we kind of add some glamour to that. So, today we can talk about Maxwell's equations. I mean, he's long gone. We remember him through his equations and some of his other work. We can talk about Marconi. We remember him a little bit less, perhaps, about his great work in radio and things like this. And the Marconi company now is also long gone. But these are all important things, and they all add to the intellectual infrastructure. And this is what I think really Flexner was talking about in the usefulness of useless knowledge. Is there any really useless knowledge? And certainly, if we went off and try to do some work in some very obscure areas, it might appear useless, although there's a lot of very good R&D to do in very applied areas. It's very close to applications, so increasing the likelihood that we'll have some applications. And you can see this, I see this in some courses I teach. You see, wow, these ideas evolved into these other areas and these other ideas and became parts of this new programming language and that old programming language and these other things and these operating systems and all this good stuff. And so it depends on how you structure the knowledge, in all these areas in R&D. And I think that one thing, if I even want to take a step further, on the industrial side, I take a look at Ray Dalio's ideas of radical transparency. And I'm no expert on Ray Dalio's philosophy, but I picked up on the news media his idea of radical transparency.
Right.
And science has some of that. Okay, so the whole scientific process is supposed to be a radically transparent process. If I do an experiment, I want anybody, even people I don't know who they are, to be able to reproduce it. Okay. So I want to have it thoroughly described. I want to have it carefully described. If I publish a patent, okay, if I obscure things in that patent and make it hard to reproduce, it can be depatented. It can be put in the public domain. I no longer have the value of that intellectual property assigned to me. So radical transparency is maybe a step further than what we do in science and engineering, but it is not unknown to them by any stretch. And so there's a nexus here of the industrial and the scholarly. And I sometimes, and it's natural, if you're on the A team, you challenge the B team. And if you're on the B team, you challenge the A team. That's a natural thing to do. And it's a good thing to do. Competition and challenge is good. But I also always worry that sometimes one side dismisses the other side as, in a way, yet they're both extremely valuable. And if we look at increasing our standard of living, they both play a huge role.